I'm realizing that, as you were speaking, I realized this thing about the conscious mind is so important, because the idea, I would never do that. Yesterday when we spoke about this, what is normal behavior in the morning, things that people would never do. I would never kiss a stranger in the street, for instance. But then, of course, we all know that in specific contexts, like the hen party, that is not only allowed and encouraged, it's also something that I would engage in. So already we are lying to ourselves about, I would never do that. And we have, I would say, millennia, possibly hundreds of thousands of years of experimentation with the conscious mind through alcohol or other substances where you turn that off. And people, you know, who wake up in the morning and watch video of what they did when they were drunk, and they cannot, it's not just that they don't remember, they don't accept that they could have possibly done that because they are not that kind of a person. So you guys are both smiling like, yeah, they think that. So let's talk a little bit about that. Do we even know what we would never do, humans?
No, define no. we feel what we want to do.
Yeah.
But sometimes we always have a choice, of course. You can choose to be hypnotized. You can choose to experience, do I want to be on stage? Do I want to see or be seen? We can always choose to accept something as a new reality, if not, you know, reality forever. So just for a little while, you can choose to accept a reality where the stranger on the street is someone you feel familiar with, that you would actually kiss.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's possible for everyone. I'm saying it could be possible.
But doesn't it feel like, based on everything we've heard in the 2 days, that if you, I mean, in a situation where you could take almost any human, probably any human in the world, if you know them well enough, if you understand them well enough, you could design the experience that will completely change their behavior.
Yeah.
Right? Bjarke?
Yeah, that's, of course you can, but it depends on, do you know all the factors and so on. And of course you can trigger something in people that's not very good triggering, but, you know, if you really want to. Probably everybody's seen the movie The Game, where Michael Douglas is put into a game and he can't step out of it. Of course you can design that and execute that, and it has
people do.
And people do. So at some point you'll be picked up and you don't know where you're going to go. That's exciting, but also it's super scary. But some people want that. A lot of people don't, of course.
And we also create our own games. We create our own reality all the time.
But there's something here that's really important, ethically speaking, which has to do with consent. So already when you're speaking about this horror experience, you say, well, they have to sign a waiver form. And I've worked for a long, long time, and actively for the last few years, about this idea of safety in live role-playing games and other intense participatory experiences. Because now, for grown-ups, we're designing them to be pushing boundaries, all kinds of boundaries. And what we have found in that field is that of course the goal should always be to try and get informed consent from the participants. You want to give them a very clear idea what kinds of experiences they will participate in, and you do. And then they say, yes, this is what I want, and they sign up, and they give you their money, and they prepare. And they have no idea, because if they haven't had those experiences, they don't know what they will feel like, and they always underestimate how powerful it can be. And then they either say, and often it's a positive experience, but some people say, but I didn't want to do that. That is not who I am. That I am, they say these things, a little percentage, but it still happens. And then, of course, what we learn from this is that informed consent is meaningless if you don't have the information, and you can never have the information. So how are you going to approach that in your horror stage show?
I'm not sure yet. But okay.
We should talk.
It's always important to setting the rules. Even in a comedy show, I set rules. Mm-hmm. You cannot leave the stage unless I tell you can. You cannot attack the hypnotist. And believe me, you need to set these rules, because it happens.
But do you set the rule of if I want to abort, like if I want to step out of the thing if I want to change my mind?
The conscious mind is always there. Is always there to protect us. And if we feel we've had enough, we always have the choice to leave.
But do people leave? Does that happen?
Yeah, people leave. Yeah. If they want to leave, they leave.
Yeah.
And always you can set rules like, if this is too scary, hug the hypnotist. He'll make you feel better. And that's a direct suggestion.
Bjarke, what are your thoughts on consent in participatory experiences?
Well, consent, I think a lot of experiences, you only give consent at the start, like if you go on a roller coaster, you think you're going to be able to handle it. But I think many people who are in the middle of the sort of going up and down, they don't quite agree at that point that this is a good idea. And then they come out alive on the other end and think, oh, this was great, I tried something that I didn't think that I would ever go through. But when you create experiences where it's very difficult to explain what this is about, you need to have very clear mechanisms for people to opt out of the situation. So when they think in their mind, I don't want to be here, they should probably leave. And this is super difficult. There's peer pressure, there's that you want to show that you can handle it and so on. But you have to be super focused as a designer to show that it is you who are opting into the situation, and at any given time you have the possibility to opt out, and there will be no social or other repercussions at all. And if you can convey that to people, I think you've taken a very big step.
I also think it's really important to have to be aware of what tradition you are operating in and what tradition your audience or participants are coming from. Because, for instance, in hypnosis, you have to be aware of the ethics. So, of course, culturally, hypnotists are. Role-playing game designers also tend to be that. But in the theater and in contemporary art, for instance, there is this tradition that, well, art is important, the most important. The point of art is to rattle you and terrify you and take you places where you didn't want to go, necessarily. So, in the art context, there is a lot of cultural capital and a lot of arrogance with these issues that would never fly in the sort of entertainment sphere. And if you're working in those spheres, you may have to think actually harder than if you're working with obvious scaring or manipulation tactics, right? Does anybody have a question?
Carl.
So, thank you for two very interesting talks. I'm thinking that if we perceive the world to be a place partly designed for evil by evil, for all of us not interested in that or not wanting to take part in that, how would we reframe our toolboxes in such a way that we could design our own opt-outs in the sort of real-time world of others' designed evilness upon us?
Can I just see if I have understood your question? I think you're asking, since people are using design to manipulate us all the time, can we use design to kind of hack that or opt out of other people's realities that are forced upon us? What do you say?
I think of course you can, and it's been done. For example, the pickup artist book, The Game, which has specific rules about how to pick up women, and it's super derogatory and so on. Then there's a counter movement that teaches the skills to women so they can identify when these methods are being used and say, hey, you're using necking now, stop being a dick, right? So it's about informing and schooling and so on. So I think that's sort of the first step. There's, of course, a big problem online where the internet has gone from being a public place where everybody can put up their own stuff to be private. And of course, it's still public, but 99% of the internet you guys are using are private companies in a private sphere. Even though that Google or Facebook are saying that this is a public sphere, it's not. They can decide exactly what content is allowed in that space. So they can choose to manipulate you if they want to. Hopefully they will not. So, and at least Carsten is a really good guy, so they're hiring good people.
You said, what if you could be your own hypnotist? Can you?
Sort of, yeah. Not in the way that, you have your own stage at home and you make yourself do. Oh well, that's a good idea. That would be awesome. But you can
be it television anytime.
You can manipulate your own thoughts and feelings and the way you work. And when we speak about manipulation, it's got such a negative feeling about it. Manipulation is really, we're changing things.
Mm. And I think, I manipulated myself before going on stage, because like 5 minutes before I have to go on stage, like most people, you become a little bit nervous. So I did power poses backstage. I did like big metal, and cited heavy metal lyrics in my mind. And this is true for everybody. If you raise your arms over your head for 30 seconds, you will be more decisive. You'll take
We did it yesterday.
Yeah, you did yesterday, right? So that works perfectly. So you can do that, and yeah, don't listen to sad music before you go on stage. I don't know.
Solid advice. Okay, we have one more question, and then we're moving on. Here you go.
Thank you. Since I have a theater background, but also go to a lot of theater and art things, I think there's a real problem is the fear of missing out, I think. Because I even if I know that I can opt out anytime, I don't know what I'm going to miss if I opt out, so then maybe I will take things too far for my own good. And what are your views on how can you sort of work around that?
Well, if we take, it's not actually true, but you take that take the left side of the brain and right side of the brain, so the right is making all the sound decisions, and the left hand is just flying all over and just doing whatever it damn pleases, is that you need to stop and focus. There's been quite a lot of studies about that if you are in an agitated state, either angry or sad or aroused, that you make very poor choices because that part of the brain is firing on all cylinders.
And aroused is not only sexual, it can also mean like interested in something.
Yeah. So you need to stop up and take some deep breath and like, do I really, really want to do this? And ask that question like say 4 or 5 times, and then you can listen to your gut and say, no, but I really want to go because it's going to be super interesting, but maybe it's not a good idea. And then you probably listen to that part of you. Or you just go and, belly flop into the deep end, and that can also be a great experience. So it's also about framing. So if we frame that I will go to this participatory art piece and it will be super horrible and that's what I'm aiming for, that can be a super positive experience. But if you, again, if you don't know that that's going to happen, it's going to be super horrible. So it's about that expectation management you talked about, is that we really need as designers to make sure people are informed as much as possible about this. So, and then they can make that choice.
What about Dan?
Yeah, that's again why ethics are so important, because a hypnotist is a leader, is in control of what happens. And I'll make sure no one goes too far, or whatever you mean by that, because, I want to perform again. I don't want a bad reputation, and so on. I do a family show, for instance, and people can't go too far. And you don't need to worry about missing out because you're there. You remember everything. Well, most people are.
And I think, and another important point there is that stories are powerful. It's very difficult to leave even a bad movie in the middle because you want to know how it ends. Many people have to read even books they hate to the very last page because you just have to find out what happens, even if you think it sucks. So that mechanism is there if it has a strong narrative structure. And that's something that you have to kind of take into account as well as a designer. We have to move on, guys. We could talk about this all day, so we're going to continue talking about it in another frame. Thank you, Dan Ahtola and Bjarki Pedersen.
Thank you.
Thank you.